Hello to everyone starting to tune in. Um, we'll just wait for a few more people to get here and then we'll start. In the meantime, you can just enjoy the slides on the screen here.
Spread the vote.
Yeah, that's my mom.
Which one?
The one at the bottom right, it was there a little while ago. You'll see it. We're both holding up. That was for my Philemon Villa. Although he's not running for Congress again this time, but
Philemon Villa, yeah.
yeah, over on the right.
And then Cole, you're with the Central Texas Civic Engagement Alliance.
That I am.
You
And
work
that
with Strauss.
say again.
You work with Annette Strauss.
That I do. I'm lucky enough to be housed at the Annette Strauss Institute. Absolutely.
If you haven't already, you should ask her story about Jack Brooks.
Oh, our director.
Yeah.
Okay, I will. I certainly will. We have a meeting tomorrow. I'll bring it up.
Great. Well, it looks like we have a bit of a crowd here, so I think we can get started. Hello to everyone tuning in. My name is Natalie York, and I'm a Challenge Success Manager here at HeroX, and I've been working with the Jack Brooks Foundation on the Help America Vote Challenge since the start. So it's been a super exciting process to see everyone's submissions come in, and we've received a lot of wonderful submissions. And I'm excited to learn a bit more about the three we have here today. So we'll start with a very quick round of introductions, just with everyone we've got on our panel. If everyone just wants to go through and say their name, if they're affiliated with an organization, where they are, and then for the three winners, what compelled you to compete in the challenge. But I'll start with Laura.
My name is Laura Vignal, and I'm from Brownsville, Texas. And I have been working on campaigns for many years, and we've always noticed that the student turnout here in the Rio Grande Valley is extremely low. And I've seen this going back to 2003. And so when I saw that the Jack Brooks Foundation was asking for ideas, I think it was wonderful. We really sat down to research it, and I hope that these ideas are helpful to you and will help get up. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Laura. Awesome, and we will move on to Kat if you want to give us an introduction as well.
Hi, I'm Kat Calvin. I'm the founder and executive director of Spread the Vote. We are an organization that helps people get government-issued photo ID, so the little ID you get at the DMV that over 21 million eligible voters in the country don't have, but you need ID to vote in 36 states, but given how things are going, it'll probably be a lot more than that by the end of the year. So we help folks get all the documents required to get an ID. We help pay for everything. We help with advocacy and transportation to government offices, basically everything that they need to get an ID that they use for jobs and housing and medical care, ironically, COVID testing and vaccines right now, a lot of things, but also to vote. And so when an election comes around, we help register all of our clients. We provide voter education. 77% of our clients have never voted before, so we do a lot of work helping them figure out how to vote, what the options are, etc., and help them get to the polls. We're in 17 states, I believe, and we're really interested in this program because, of course, voting rights right now is under attack like perhaps never before. And so we are really working this year to just continue to increase the number of organizations that we engage with and that we partner with, to be able to make sure that we're all working together as much as we can to fight voter suppression.
Great, thank you, Kat. And last but not least, we've got Cole here. If you'd like to give us an introduction as well.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Cole Wilson. I'm calling in from Austin, Texas today. I'm proud to be representing the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life. and presenting our winning project, the Central Texas Civic Engagement Alliance. What drove us to compete for this award is what drives us to a lot of our work, and that's empowering students to make the change and better the civic health of their communities. And that's why I'm here, and I'm proud to be here and thankful as well.
Amazing. Awesome. And today we, of course, also have someone from the Jack Brooks Foundation. We've got Jeb Brooks here. Jeb, how are you today?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm particularly excited that we're all here together to celebrate the incredible work of all of our award winners, and just in improving access to the voting booth. That's the critical thing.
Awesome. Great. And why don't you give us a bit of an introduction about yourself and the Jack Brooks Foundation?
Well, I'm Jeb Brooks. I'm also here in Austin, and but before I get into that, I really want to take a minute to express my profound appreciation for HeroX. HeroX's vision and the platform that they have created has certainly made the Help America Vote Challenge reach a much broader audience, and made the whole initiative much richer than we ever could have done on our own. And so shout out to you all, and grateful. I am myself Jeb Brooks. I'm the founder of the Jack Brooks Foundation, which is an organization named in honor of my father, Jack Brooks, who served for 42 years in Congress, trying to improve the lives of all Americans. We can all remember the important Voting Rights Act of 1965, which he helped to create and craft. And we at the foundation want to continue his legacy by educating and supporting people to exercise their right to vote.
Great. Thank you, Jeb. Awesome. Just in case anyone does have any questions today, if you have any come up, feel free to drop them in the chat. My colleague is watching the chat, and if we do get a chance today, we'll try and ask some of our winners some of those questions. So if your question is for someone specific, just make sure to mention that your question's directed to. And just in case anyone here is not familiar with the challenge, if you're tuning in and this is your first introduction to the Help America Vote Challenge, I will provide a bit of a challenge overview. So the Help America Vote Challenge launched in September of 2020, and it sought to collect ideas to increase voter turnout in elections of all levels in the United States. And then, of course, we had the 2020 presidential election in the middle of the challenge, and that saw amazing voter turnout, one of the highest in United States history. But obviously, there's still many elections throughout the United States that we'd like a higher voter turnout, and until voter turnout is 100%, then this is a fight that people are going to want to keep fighting. So Jeb, I'm going to ask you just a couple questions about how the Jack Brooks Foundation got to this place, how you decided to run a challenge. So just in general, why do you think that the issue of voter turnout is still such a prevalent issue across the United States, especially in elections that aren't presidential?
Well, I think the problems that it impacted voting really over the years are complex, and there are many of them, but some of them include the current mistrust and the also misunderstanding of what government is and what it is supposed to do. This leads to the mistaken idea sometimes that people's votes don't count, which is again a misunderstanding of the power of the vote and the power it gives all of us, provided we use it. And the other thing is that in order to now exercise this power, and one of the reasons we're here together, is that some of us need some guidance in all aspects of the voting process. And that's what the foundation hopes to achieve by supporting more and more groups like those who are assembled here today, as well as our own initiatives.
Great, thank you. And of course, why is this issue of voter turnout so important to the Jack Brooks
Well, the issue of voting rights.
Foundation? I know Jack Brooks has a very interesting and important history with caring about these issues. So I'd love for you to tell our audience a bit about that.
Well, we at the JBF believe that voting is how we create together a government by and for the people. It follows then that any effort to suppress or restrict the vote, to me, represents a clear and present danger to the very idea of America. That is both the power and the importance of voting, and why the Jack Brooks Foundation is so focused on this idea.
Wonderful, thank you. And so how did you end up deciding to run a crowdsourcing challenge? Because I mean, there's so many issues that persist in the world, and how did you find HeroX and decide that this would be a great opportunity to collect ideas from the crowd?
Well, quickly on HeroX, Yoel's platform has made this possible, but specifically with respect to crowdsourcing, we believe that issues that people face with respect to voting are different for different groups of people and in different areas. And so crowdsourcing offers an opportunity for local groups to solve the problems they know best, the problems that face voters in their area. I believe that that's a much more direct way to solve some voting issues than some kind of a silver bullet coming from Washington that's going to magically fix everything.
Definitely. And I think we'll definitely see some of that today as we go through some of the winning submissions, the importance of being local and how local communities know what's best and know what's best for their community and how to make them get out and vote. So I'm excited to dive in. Great. So for this challenge, we had nearly 100 entries. And from that, we have selected our 3 amazing winners that we have here today. And I'd like to just give a quick shout out to our amazing judges as well that helped determine winners. We had Kostas Panagopoulos, the professor and department chair of College and Social Sciences and Humanities at Northeastern University. Lana Atkinson, professor of political science at the University of New Mexico. Maggie Bush, Programs and Outreach Director at the League of Women Voters, and Matthew Wheel, Director of the Elections Project at the Bipartisan Policy Center. So we had a very impressive list of voters. So I hope all the winners here today feel proud that these amazing and qualified people selected your entries. It's super exciting to work with all those great judges. Great, so we will go into the winners roundtable. I've got a slideshow and I'll pass it off to each of the winners to, if they'd like to talk a little bit more about the organization, if they are affiliated with one, and really just dive into your submission and how you think that we can improve voter turnout in the United States. And then Jeb and I'm sure we'll have some follow-up questions. So
We've got
I'll
another
just share this slideshow here, and Laura, I'll pass it off to you.
All right.
Awesome.
So that's me and my mom. And the name of this project is Vamos a Votar, or Vote Week. And it is targeting a series of counties in the lower Rio Grande Valley and border area of Texas. If you could go to the next slide. So the idea was to make a controlled study that would look at some of the reasons why this area typically has some of the lowest voter turnout in the entire state, which is Texas itself, one of the states that typically has very low voter turnout in the country. And just as someone who has worked on Republican and Democrat campaigns here and then nonpartisan campaigns, well, it's a pattern. It isn't tied to partisanship. It is something that I think people have asked about a lot, and really there isn't a complete understanding of why the turnout is so low here. I can tell you some of the demographics is the area is over 95% Hispanic. We do have many first and second generation US citizens, which I think tends to have a sort of generational effect in that When you have groups of people who the family can't vote here, then they can't show their kids how to vote or register their kids. They don't know where to go. So the kids grow up really not seeing a whole lot of participation. We see a lot of campaign phone banking in English, even though Spanish is the predominant language. And for all teenagers here, because the area is so predominantly Hispanic, I'm sure that the outreach was bilingual, but it doesn't expand it statewide or regionally, because unfamiliarity with the voting process is universal for all 17-year-olds. They've never voted before. And some of them have parental guidance and some don't. And so the idea was to make it part of a civic curriculum that all teenagers are shown how to vote in their senior year. Next slide. This is a comparison. This is the study area. Here, I don't know if you can see it. The white area in Texas on the left is the voter turnout. And you can see this whole lower region of Texas is mostly white, which means it's less than 30% voter turnout. Yeah, that area, which overlaps significantly with the Region 1 school zone, which is these counties on the left. And you can see they almost fit directly on top of each other. And that is why I've chosen that area to be, I think would be an excellent study zone for this program. Next slide. Here, just some background of what I was mentioning earlier. This is 2 weeks ago, our May 1st election. This is the Jacob Brown Auditorium at Texas Southmost College, TSC. And you can see the turnout here compared to other locations is absolutely extremely low. I mean, 3 people, 4 people voting a day. 1 person came to vote on Friday for the entire day that early voting polling place was open. Whereas you compare the public library, you've got 160, 200 people coming a day. Next slide. This is true also in 2019, the May elections. These are the city elections that I feel are extremely important, because these are the elections that, as Jeb was saying, these are the ones that really determine how our city is going to function and how money is going to be spent and allocated and directed. Here again, UTRGV, that's the University of Texas Valley. I don't know if you can see it over there, but this again has the very lowest turnout of all of the turnout. And this is 2019, this is pre-pandemic. Next slide. And again, this is going back, all of this is from the elections office. These are prior elections, 2016, 2018, runoff elections, which are critically important, the runoffs, because there was actually going to be an election. And in all of these cases, we've always, and like I think I mentioned, going back to 2013, 2003, even as far back as then, this has been a pattern. Next slide. So yeah, this is the study area of those counties that I showed you. It consists of 38 school districts, 171 high school campuses for 439,000 students, 97% Hispanic, 85% economically disadvantaged, and 20% enrolled in the bilingual program, 12.5% in the English as a second language, and 2.5% migrant farm workers. Next slide. So what we're going to do is just match and pair schools within the zone by district property values, the percentage who graduate, test scores, ethnic makeup. So you match them, and then with a coin flip, one school is assigned to the control and the other is going to be in the experimental group. Next slide. And so in the experimental group only, we're going to intervene with on-campus registration tables, specifically with bilingual voter registrars. We're going to seek to identify early on students who don't have an ID or driver's license. And, you know, they have to be eligible, seniors about to graduate. In Texas, you have to be 17 years old and 10 months. So that's already like the very end of their senior year. And then once they're registered, we will bus them to the polls for a collective first-time voting experience. So they can go through the process together. As mentioned, many of these families are first and second generation. They haven't seen the process in their own homes. And so the idea is just to have a first-time positive experience as a civic education with their friends. Next slide. And so because it's controlled, you can really get some good statistics and a much clearer understanding of how effective this is. You can compare the final registration turnout numbers. What I really did want to focus on is the percentage of households with no prior voting history that elicited voting for the first time, because you would be able to see with the control especially, and looking at prior voting history, homes that have never shown any type of voter activity, and see also if there's a spillover effect of having the kids register and vote if they encourage anyone else nearby to go and vote as well. Do comparisons between low and high income schools, determine the cost to the school and also to the program. And you can also, extend it out longitudinally over time, as well as publish the study. And next slide. And so there have been a few prior efforts. This is from North Carolina, I think the Guilford School District. They tried busing students to the polls, and the students were really happy with it. And, this one student says her parents never took them to vote, and they didn't really discuss it in front of her. And so she thought it would be very confusing and difficult. And then when they actually did it, she found out it really wasn't that hard. And now she had the understanding. Later on, if they needed to vote, she could just go out and vote, and she knew how to do it. And other students also said it boosted their confidence. And even the teachers were very positive about it and said, we teach them history from 200 years ago, but a real civic education is how to participate. And if kids don't know how to do it, then that's probably the most important thing we could teach them. So thank you. That's my presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. That was great. That was so interesting to learn. And I love your presentation. I love how data-driven it is, and the study, it's just awesome. And so interesting that, Laura, you and I have met before this, because you actually won another challenge that I worked on. And so that challenge was about catfish, so completely unrelated to voting, which I thought it was so interesting and crazy when I saw your name come up first place for this challenge as well, which is awesome. But and we always say at HeroX that some of the greatest ideas can come from someone completely outside of an industry, because they have a totally fresh perspective. So I'm interested to hear from you. Does it just so happen that you have an interest in catfish and voting, or or do you commonly just participate in these challenges, or
Actually, I guess the thing in common between, I'm also very data driven. I love research. I spend most of my time in research. I have a clinical medical research background, published author. And so I guess to me, I like looking at things from a different perspective. And this one, actually, the voting competition is something I've been involved with, at least as far as increasing turnout, many, many years here. I think I mentioned about my family and been involved in campaigns since I was a little girl. But yeah, I feel like statistics are very powerful, and that's, I think, probably the most important thing, I guess, between both of these competitions, is really looking at things in a data-driven way. So.
That's awesome. I love that. And I hope anyone watching that is thinking about participating in a HeroX challenge, they look at Laura and think, I know when you participate in these challenges, a lot of people are probably submitting like, oh, do I even have a chance, really? But I mean, Laura has won two, I think maybe a third, but you're doing amazing. So thank you for participating in this one and submitting this amazing entry.
Sure.
Jeb, do you have any questions?
Well, first, and it was the thing you spoke about last. I was really impressed with the number of metrics that you are using to track how well the program is working. And I'm sure, as you know, it will also inform you about how to make it better as different iterations come about. So I was very impressed with that. And also wanted to ask, you include reaching out to people who are not yet old enough to vote, or what I consider even the next generation of voters. And I was wondering how that idea came about as part of your program.
That really, if you look at the demographics of Texas, about 30% of the population is Hispanic, is under 30. And so this is a huge group of people who, and the map, you can see they're not turning out to vote. And historically, we've had a lot of difficulty getting them to vote. And so I felt like probably the root of this, and I guess which is why I'd want to test it with a study, is unfamiliarity with the process and lack of guidance. And I guess that was sort of, it's just been many years of working in this area on campaigns. But yeah, I feel like it's extremely important to reach out to this group of people. They're going to be the next generation. We are, how can democracy function? So I feel like it's really important that they are, brought into it.
And the other thing that you mentioned and focused on in your program, it is as much educational as it is practical. Could you talk more about the educational aspects of your initiative?
Right. It is I feel should be part of the statewide or national curriculum. That's, as adults, I mean, these are young adults about to graduate, about to become part of society, that this should be just a routine part of the last year of education. In Texas, you can register to vote age 17, 10 months, I believe. So a little bit before your 18th birthday. And so I felt like, especially when you look at like the graduation rates and how many students go to college or don't go to college, that it was important that their final year of high school would be the best time to reach as many people in this population as possible, and to teach them how to vote and just show them in a completely nonpartisan way. This is the process, just walk them through it. This is how you register. This is what a vote is, how you fill it out. And that way they don't feel any type of hesitation or fear of the unknown. That was the idea.
It's music to my ears. Thank you very much for your submission and winning.
Thank you. I'm really blown away. I love it. And I would love to see the results. And thank you, guys.
Thank you. Awesome. Yes. Thanks again, Laura. That was a great presentation. And up next, we have Kat Calvin from Spread the Vote. She's the executive director, and her team was awarded second prize. So Kat, I'll hand it over to you to talk about your submission.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Kat. Like I said before, I am the founder and ED of Spread the Vote, which is an organization that helps people get government-issued photo ID and get to the polls. We operate in 17 states. We talked specifically about Florida and the submissions, but everyone here is from Texas, so I'm also going to talk about what we do in Texas so I don't feel left out. So So essentially how our program works is that we have 18 staff members, over 1,000 trained volunteers, and over 500 partners across the country, and growing. And what we do is we help people walk through all of the steps that they need in order to get an ID. If anyone has ever been to the DMV, you know it is a terrible, terrible place. And it's a torture to get an ID. And nobody wants to do it. I still don't have a real ID because I don't want to go to the DMV. And this is actually what I do for a living. So that's how awful it is. And there are actually over 21 million eligible voters in the country who don't have ID, but who need it to vote in almost every state, 36, including Florida, including Texas. And getting ID, it requires money. Our average ID cost is $40 a person, but it can really range much, much higher. It requires transportation. And if you don't have an ID, you don't have a driver's license. And so getting to the DMV or vital records can be really difficult. It requires just, figuring out paperwork and how to get a birth certificate, because if you go to vital records and ask for a birth certificate, they will ask you for your ID, which doesn't work out if you don't have one. So it's really, really wildly complicated. You need a social security card, and the Social Security Administration will tell you to mail your ID to the Social Security Administration, which, first of all, never, ever, ever do that. If you need a Social Security card, just email me, never mail it. You'll never get it back. But also, if you don't have an ID, you can't do that. So it's a wildly complicated process, and we are the only national organization that helps people get photo ID, get it in their hands. Like I said, you need it for jobs, you need it for all sorts of things. We do it in a couple of ways. We have field staff on the ground throughout Florida and Texas, North Carolina, some other states that just work every day helping people get ID. We've been all virtual during COVID, but people are finally getting vaccinated and back on the ground, which is very exciting. We also have over 1,000 trained volunteers who work in our 17 states. And then we work with partners. And with many of our partners, we set them up with our technology and our funds and our training and support. And then they get the IDs for their clients. So we work with the Florida Department of Corrections and the New Orleans Public Defenders and Goodwill of Central Texas and all sorts of different organizations that have large numbers of people who need ID, and already have sort of caseworkers or social workers, different employees who are trying to help their clients and communities get employment or get into rehab facilities or get placed into supportive housing facilities or things like that, and the ID is the barrier for that. We also sort of work within different systems. So for instance, we're part of Texas 211. So if you're in Texas, you can call 211 and say, hey, I need an ID, and they will send you to us, and then we will get you an ID. So we work to try to reach folks in as many different ways as possible. Only 1% of our clients have regular access to a phone, for fewer than that to the internet. And so for us, it's all about us going out on the ground to them. We don't have offices. I run everything from here because we have to be the ones who go out to reach our folks, which made it really difficult during COVID, but we did it in order to make sure that they can get the documents and information, et cetera, because they can't just hop in a car or on the phone and get to us. And then during elections, we work to make sure that our clients and surrounding communities are able to get to the polls. So like I said before, 77% of our clients have never voted before. 100% of them can't vote without us because they don't have ID. But there are also a lot of what we call micro barriers to voting. So voter registration is hugely important, but it is just the first step. And if you look at most states, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are registered to vote who don't have, for instance, the ID they need to get to the polls. So without that, being registered to vote is not, it's not helpful, right? It's one step out of many that they have to take. We also have transportation issues. We have issues with childcare. We frequently have volunteers who will go in twos and someone will watch the kids while the parent either votes or goes into the DMV or whatever. There are a lot of just barriers to sort of education, a lot of things that Laura was talking about. If you've never voted before, and we've had first-time voters from 18 to 79 who, they say, we'll vote for the insurance commissioner. I guarantee none of you know what the insurance commissioner does. Nobody knows, right? And so how do they know who the best person is to vote for? So we make voter guides that we have to print out because, again, our clients don't have access to the internet. We do put them on our website for free. So during elections, you can go on our site and see our voter guides, but we print them out and we have community events at shelters, at churches, at food banks, at all the places inside of jails. Actually, we last year with Vote.org started the first national voting program for incarcerated citizens who are eligible to vote by mail in jail, and registered actually over 800 incarcerated citizens, and we've now made that a permanent program and are working with jails across the country to help people vote while they're incarcerated. And so the goal is to reach people where they are and help them understand how to vote, who you want to vote for. We're totally nonpartisan, but we'll say this is what the Board of Supervisors does. Just as a hint, the Board of Supervisors are the most important people in your life, and you have no idea who they are, what they do, and they run this country. It's really important that you know about the Board of Supervisors. And so we'll tell people this is what they do. And so then when they look at who's running and what their resume is, it's easier for them to decide who they want to hire, right? Who they want to vote for, because they know what the job is. And then we help them make voting plans. We help them understand, your polling place is going to vote with an electronic machine, and here's how that works, or with paper, and here's how that works. Just all of those steps, what their ADA accessibility rights are. We have a huge problem in this country with discriminating against disabled people at the polls, and so we work to make sure that everyone we work with knows this is actually what rights you have and how you can vote, and what they have to have for you, etc. And then we physically throw them into cars and buses and lifts and whatever we have and take them to the polls and make sure that they can vote. And then, well, now it's becoming illegal in several states, but we usually hand out water and snacks and different things at the polls. So we'll see what happens there. We may all be getting arrested in November, but we also try to make sure that while people are actually in line, that we're just doing everything we can to help address all of those micro barriers. We give out micro grants to organizations. So we gave out a lot around across Texas and Florida in 2020 to libraries and church groups and student groups who wanted to hire a bus to take students, or this one amazing library in Central Texas wanted to have like Taco Tuesday voting. And I was like, I'll give you all the money for tacos that you want, and like to have people come and have tacos and do civic education and get them out to the polls. So we try to support little groups that are also in our areas that are trying to do the same type of hands-on voter turnout that we're trying to do to help people overcome those barriers. So it's a combination of us 365 days a year helping folks get the IDs that they need, and then around every election making sure that they have all of the other tools that they need to physically get to the polls.
Thank you so much for that. I'm blown away. It sounds like you guys are doing absolutely amazing work in every corner of the issues that impact voting. So that was so interesting. Jeb, do you have any follow-up questions for Kat?
I'm really touched because you nailed what we at the JBF called the voting process, which starts, as you've elaborated on, getting that first government issue ID. Everything starts from that. So even if you're voting in November, you got to start in January, get everything going. What I wanted to ask you about that particular aspect, since you focus on it, where did the nexus of that idea come from? How did that emerge as such a clear and necessary first step for your organization?
Well, it started in 2013 with the destruction practically of the Voting Rights Act in the Supreme Court.
That's Bill.
I know, and they're doing it again. So, your dad's probably turning over. So in law school, I studied voting rights, but way back when I was a youth in law school, we still had the full protections of the Voting Rights Act. And everything seemed fine. And then a few years later, for folks who don't know, there was a case that went to the Supreme Court called Shelby County v. Holder. And to very briefly describe it, basically the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was an extraordinary landmark document, but I also don't think people understand how forward-thinking it was. So I mean, huge props to your dad and everyone, because there's a lot in it that we sometimes forget now to put in bills that they really thought through in 1965. And one of those things was that for the states that were the most egregious at suppressing the vote, very important to note, all 50 states suppressed the vote. All 50 states did a lot to make sure that people of color couldn't vote in this country, but there were some that were worse than others. And so they said for those states, if you want to change anything about your election laws, you have to get permission from the Department of Justice. And then they would go and tell the Department of Justice, hey, I'd like to do this thing. And the DOJ would either say, yeah, that's fine, or they'd say, no, that's incredibly racist, go away, never come back. So in 2013, Shelby County, Alabama sued. It reached the Supreme Court. And what the Supreme Court said was basically, hey, we've got a Black president. Black people are voting. Racism is over. We no longer need these protections. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, very intelligently, because Ruth Bader Ginsburg, everything she said was brilliant. But she said, saying that because there are a lot of Black Americans who are voting means that we no longer need the protections is like saying, I'm standing in the middle of a rainstorm with an umbrella and I'm dry, so I can throw away my umbrella. And she basically predicted exactly what would happen, which is that immediately, and when I say immediately, within 2 hours, Alabama and Texas started working on passing these things called voter ID laws, which in 2013, there were like 4-ish states that had them. They were sort of testing it out. They were usually like buried in lawsuits. From 2013 to 2016, we had 21 states that had voter ID laws in time for the 2016 elections. And we're now at 36 and possibly growing. So what the VRA did, it's also like, if you think about why you like never heard of voter purging before around like 2014, this is why, right? There are a lot of things that they weren't able to do pre-Shelby County Beholder, which they are now. So I was paying attention to this, and very few people were. It really took, I think, a lot of people by surprise. And during the 2016 elections, now some of us were like, "Hi, do you see what's happening here?" And other people were like, "Oh, la-di-da, everything's fine." So when the 2016 elections happened, it was our first presidential election without the full protections of the Voting Rights Act since 1965. And when I was looking, I had run some nonprofits, and then I'd had like activist crash, and I decided I was just going to be a boring lawyer and never run a nonprofit again. And then the election happened, and it was very, very obvious that voter ID laws had really had an impact, certainly on the presidential election, but also I think it's important to note that local and state elections are much easier to sway through voter suppression because you don't have the Electoral College, you have much smaller margins of victories, you have to suppress fewer votes to change an election. And they were really doing that with voter ID laws. And except in Pennsylvania, no attempts to judicially fight voter ID laws or legislatively have worked. Texas's voter ID law has been struck down by the courts 5 times. They still have it. And so I was looking at all of this in 2016, and I thought, you know what? It seems to me, and in my head, this sounded really easy. I was like, well, if we can't get rid of these things in the courts or in the legislatures, let's just get people IDs. Haha, 4 years later, I'm realizing that was much more difficult and expensive than I thought it would be. But it just seemed very clear the only way to change these laws is to help the people who aren't able to vote because of them have everything that they need to vote, and then get them to the polls, and then they can elect people who are going to represent their interests. And so that's why we focused on IDs. We realized really quickly, oh, if you don't have an ID to vote, you don't have an ID for jobs or for housing or for all these other things, which A, are really important for life, but B, when you don't know where you're going to sleep at night, it's really difficult to be able to think about voting. And so we really focused on helping folks get the IDs they need for everything, and then helping them get to the polls. And we're at almost 7,000 IDs so far, so we're working on getting there.
Well, I'm so grateful to you. Like you mentioned, I thought I was one of the only ones who realized the absolute earthquake issue with that horrible mistake by the Supreme Court. Natalie, I want to ask, how are we doing on time?
Yeah, if you've got one more question for Kat, I think we have time.
Yeah, because I don't want to miss this thing. Another part of your program, specifically relates to those people who are in jail but should be able to vote. They face very specific issues to voting, and I wonder if you could elaborate on them a little bit for the group so we can learn what some of those issues are.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that most people don't realize is that there are actually hundreds of thousands of people who are currently incarcerated who can vote for 2 reasons. Either A, they are only in jail because they can't pay bail and actually haven't been convicted of anything, which is a big problem in this country. And 2, they've only been convicted of misdemeanors. In almost every state, you can vote unless you've been convicted of a felony. For for almost committing almost any crime, there are some sort of Kentucky exceptions, I like to call them. But for the most part, if you have only been convicted of a misdemeanor, you haven't been convicted, you can vote. So there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in jails across the country, except for Vermont and Maine. They're great. They let everybody vote. They make it really easy. Vermont and Maine have no issues. Everybody else, right? They do. And so the problem, of course, is being able to legally do something in jail and being able to practically do it are two different things. There are very few departments of corrections outside of Vermont and Maine that will make sure that people are able to register to vote, that will give them ballots, that will even let them know that it's legal. There are the rules for, you know, what you can mail to jails, and like even how many pieces of paper can be in a packet, and all of these things are very specific. I have actually a letter right here from a woman in jail who tried to register to vote with a bunch of her other incarcerated citizens, but you had to register to vote in black or blue pen, and the jail would only give them pencils, right? So there are all of these different barriers that they put into place. And then very frequently, they're not even putting barriers into place as much as they're just really like not addressing the issue, and staff don't know and no one's paying attention. So what we did when we built Vote by Mail in Jail is we built a program in which we basically have either a chaplain in the jail or an administrator or someone who is a responsible person within the jail who has relationships and who really cares about making sure that people can vote, who becomes our partner, and we train them on how to register people, how to sign up for absentee voting, how to do voter education. We send them guides and things like that. We send them all of the forms and materials and stamps, because you also can't send stamps to inmates because that counts as currency, right? So it's another problem, but we can send them to the partners, right? We talk to and work things out with jail administrators and departments of corrections, and basically do everything so that we can send all of these materials to a partner who can then walk into jail with registration forms and absentee forms and sit with an inmate and walk them through the process and help make sure that they have a pen, right, a stamp, all of these things, and that they are then able to vote. You know, it is a thing that, again, should not be an issue. But I mean, first of all, we shouldn't be incarcerating people because they're too poor to pay bail. So that's one thing, right? But yeah, this is a thing where there are so many people in this country who actually have rights, right? Have the right to vote and don't even know it. You know, that's the same thing. Most people who serve time do not realize that in almost every state, once they're off parole and, you know, usually have paid their fines and fees, which is a whole other issue, they can vote. And in many states, it's easier than that, but they don't know it. And so you have people, I mean, Snoop Dogg just said this. It's been like 30 years that he thought he couldn't vote, and he just found out he could. Well, he's like a trillionaire who smokes pot on TV with Martha Stewart, right? Like, if he doesn't know, then nobody knows. And so we're attempting to make sure that currently incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people can vote.
I think somewhere we just elected someone either to the House of the Senate who, when he got to Washington, didn't realize there were three branches of government. I think I read that somewhere. Anyway, but again, sensitive to time. That was a great introduction. I learned a lot from that review. It's an area I don't know very well, so I'm grateful to you for that explication.
Yeah, thank you so much for, I feel like I'm in school, but like it's my favorite class ever. So I just learned so much. I'm actually from Canada, so although I think most of the world is pretty familiar or fairly familiar with what goes on in the US politically, that was super interesting, and I really appreciate that. And it's so interesting. I can't imagine how much you've learned since 2013, going through all these processes and all the hiccups. And it sounds like you guys just keep pushing to, I'm just blown away. I think the work you're doing is amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. So next we have Cole, and he is with the Central Texas Civic Engagement Alliance. So Cole, I'd love to hear more about your team and your submission.
Absolutely, Natalie. Thank you so much. And I'm excited to talk about it. I'll jump right into this first photo. This is the dream, the goal. This is a picture of the Civic Engagement Alliance. It's housed and founded at the University of Texas at Austin. And what you're seeing are a group of students with their the individual who gave them the ability to register other students to vote. These folks are holding up packets showing that they can now go and find their friends, find their organization members, their dorm hall, co-eds to register them to vote. So when our project is all said and done, we hope to have 24 of these photos to show off. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide, please. So the Central Texas Civic Engagement Alliance we aim for it to be made up of bipartisan and nonpartisan organizations, clubs, networks of student hubs throughout the region. The goal for this initiative is to increase voter registration, access to voter education, and participation with the electoral process across Central Texas. It's a light lift for membership, but it really goes a long way when you multiply these requirements across the region, across campuses, across organizations, member organizations. All they need to do is sign up one member of their club, their group, to be a voting contact point, or as we like to call it, the voting friend, the friend that's got the voting info to pass out. Agree to share election information leading up to an election, register all the members of their organization to vote, and send one member to our meeting, a semesterly meeting where we deputize students to be deputy voter registrars. The next slide is the genesis of this project, the Civic Engagement Alliance that was founded at UT Austin. It was made up of so many far-reaching groups, from really civically engaged organizations like student government and organizations that have an active role at the Texas State Capitol, to a cappella groups and dance groups and engineering organizations and associations for future lawyers or future healthcare providers. And when we began to really hit all the corners, all four corners of campus, and when students begin to hear an echo of nonpartisan, accessible, student-centric voting information, we get that wraparound voting life that research coming out of Tufts University would suggest leads students to the polls. It gives them the power and empowers them to hit the voting booth with confidence. I believe I have one more slide outlining Central Texas, which is admittedly a debatable parameter. A quick Google search will show you that Central Texas could be everywhere from College Station to, oh no, it looks like some of my text got a bit wonky. Sorry about that, team. Central Texas can range from College Station all the way to Austin, up to Waco and down to San Antonio. So there's some debate on what Central Texas means, but for the sake of this discussion and of this presentation, we're going to define Central Texas as from Austin, North Austin, Round Rock for my Texans in the audience, all the way down to San Marcos, which is a little bit smaller than that College Station, up to almost Dallas map that some folks choose to use. But know that there are well over a dozen campuses and hubs of higher education along that route, from one of the largest educators in the state, the University of Texas and Texas State University, to smaller private institutions like St. Edward's University and HBCUs like Houston-Tillotson here in Austin, Texas. So our definition of Central Texas still encompasses a lot, and we're excited to reach out to our partners and new friends in this arena. I think I have one more slide, which will lead us directly into the next part of this conversation. But I also have my work and cell phone number at the bottom. Boy, this got a little janky via email. Sorry about that, y'all.
I think it was my transfer, so you're all good, Cole.
Awesome. Well, my apologies anyway, around. I'll take it.
I think it was my bad.
That's my email address, my work phone, and my cell number. So if anyone has questions or wants to talk more about this, or is calling in from Concordia University and is saying to themselves, geez, my org needs to be signed up, let me know. I'm always happy at any and all hours of the day to talk about nonpartisan voter engagement. And with that, I don't think I'm over on time. Got my little stopwatch started. I'll open up for questions.
All right, and you've actually covered a little bit
Go
about.
ahead, Jeb, if you have any follow-up.
Yes, thank you. You've already covered some of this, but one of my questions was, you're reaching out to different and disparate organizations. What has been helpful, especially in that initial contact, to get them to sign on to your program? What has been helpful in bringing all these other people in under one idea?
The promise of reliable, nonpartisan information, especially in this arena. Research at Tufts University argues and supports the fact that college students, one of the main things that keeps them from accessing the polls regularly is basic civic information. It's not that students aren't excited about it or wouldn't want to. It's that they need those basic tools and those basic skills to get there. And when you come to the table with them and with the promise that there's no partisan slant and you have nothing other than that information straight from the source, distilled down to a college student's needs with answers to typical questions like how often do I need to re-register if I'm moving? College students are a transient population, or do I switched dorm rooms last year? Do I need to do something online? These sort of ongoing basic questions that can be hindrances for college students in this population getting into the polls. They want it. They want that information. When you say we got it for you and your friends will be there, folks usually call back. They respond to that email.
And then my other question is, in reading through your program, I think you mentioned a hurdle faced by everybody, in that you certainly you could expand quicker if you had more resources. And so this is if I use a wonky term, this is a resource constrained environment in these nonprofit groups. But you also mentioned email and use of social media. Can you talk a little bit about how technology can be leveraged to sort of overcome some of these other limitations?
Absolutely. And Jeb, you touch on something interesting, social media. And I've worked in this space for a while, and it never fails to amaze me how a phone call and an email sometimes just don't land, but a Twitter message just resonates differently with our students. It's the Facebook message to the organization chair, and again with a population that's moving and shifting so frequently, that email address to president at Punjabawaki's, a dance group at UT Austin that represents South Asian members of our community. That president email address may have been passed off 3 semesters ago. That could be going to a graduate who's working in Chicago at this point. But that Facebook account, somebody's manning that. Somebody's going to respond to that one. In response to your point about the need to flex what we have at our hands and what's available for free online when resources are stretched thin, there's no premium account to Twitter, and that's a blessing. And those search functionalities I don't have to build out, and I don't need a tech support staff to build that out for us either. An at UT Austin or a hashtag Texas can give me a lot of results quickly. There's still people hours to need to go into compiling that data, and I want to thank the folks on our team who've done that work in the past. It's unbelievably helpful. But those resources, those databases, while it's a great place for hashtags and quick quibs and memes, it's also a really wonderful tool in trying to contact this community in particular and get in contact with folks who might otherwise not think about getting their members registered to vote, or are waiting for someone to tell them that it is totally in their wheelhouse and that they can hit the polls, and all they need to know is bring that photo ID and get registered, something along those lines. And I think that answered your question.
Oh, absolutely. Actually gave me a lot of good ideas too. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cole. We are coming to time. We won't have much of a closeout, but I really wanted to give the 3 of you as much time as possible because it's been so interesting and amazing to learn about your submissions and the amazing work that you're up to. So thank you from myself and Jeb and from the rest of the HeroX and Jack Brooks Foundation team. I know I speak for all of us when I say we were so impressed with your entries, and we really appreciate everyone that participated and took the time to submit an entry. And then thank you to our audience as well that took the time to tune in today and learn more about some of them. And for anyone that is listening, I hope that you got a little bit of inspiration from this webinar to check out HeroX HeroX and all of the awesome opportunities that are on there, and then also to check out the Jack Brooks Foundation and the amazing work that they're doing. So I encourage you to check out their socials and the events. They're up to a lot of great things. And one final thank you, Jeb, if you just have 20 seconds if you want to say a thank you as well.
I'll make it as quick as possible. I need to reinforce, and Cole was just talking about leveraging technology. HeroX has been critically important, and their platform to making this whole Help America Vote challenge possible. And they just deserve, they are a critical part of what all of us are now trying to do individually and collectively. So grateful to them. I want to thank, of course, all the award winners. And all the people who submitted to the Help America Vote challenge. And then lastly, for all of you, it should be noted, even by the creation of each of your groups and the participation that you have already advanced the need for voter education and voter inspiration. All y'all should feel proud of what you've already done and what we're going to do in the future. So let's keep it going. And thank you all for being here today.
Thank you. Great. We're signing off now. So thank you again. And we hope that everyone here gets out and votes in their next election.
Thank you all.
Bye now.
Bye now.